Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about grazing issues in Utah, specifically with 3 forests looking at making amendments to their grazing plans within their overall management plans. Joining us is one of the decision makers on the Forest Service side for this segment, Alan Rowley, who is the Forest Supervisor for Fish Lake National Forest, headquartered in Richfield, Utah. Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for asking.
What brought about all this? This letter and communication to relook at grazing on the forest?
That's a fair question. National Forests have a land management plan, a broad plan, giving them general guidance and direction of here's what we want the resources to look like. Here's our desired condition for the future, right? We want to manage towards this. And some other guidelines or standards about how we behave and what we do to get there. That's what a plan's all about. The Fish Lake Dixie and the Manti LaSalle, Fish Lake Dixie all have plans that were approved back in about 1986. They're kind of out of date. We've had a few amendments since then, tweaks to it. And so what's driving this conversation is we think our plans are out of date. We think some of the information, we're smarter now than we were in 1986. We didn't include some direction we should have, in hindsight now. We included some direction in our forest plans that just ain't working for us, quite frankly, right now. It's tying our hands and not getting results on the ground we're looking for. So in general, that's what's driving our conversation about changing grazing. Specifically, why grazing, the interest about grazing, both from external groups, internally ourselves, looking at resource conditions on the ground, finding repeated, a reoccurring theme in some settings where we go out and look at the resource conditions on the ground, and it's really not what any of us want, any of us from the agency, the public at large, and I'd even say the grazing community as well, knowing that some of our sites have been managed so that the production potential for the site may be going down. And I think that's not a good thing to do for stewardship. You know, is there a different way we could manage that piece of real estate so the production potential is stable, or maybe even it goes up a couple points? Wouldn't that be good? So that's what's driving us.
The fear that comes from a lot of these people, as they've expressed it to me, Alan, is that only grazing is being looked at, and they're afraid that, like much similar to their concerns about wild horses, that we protect the wild horse, which is actually causing the damage to the resource, and it's not really the grazing, but the grazers are going to have to pay for it. And so when they come in from that mindset, and I know I know that's not your agency, but that mindset, they go, well, if we're going to look at it, we need to look at logging and timber and some of these other things that have affected what grazing looks like as opposed to what it used to. And they can make some valid arguments. Conifers suck up a ton of water, and there's a lot of conifer growth that used not to be there. And so, I can kind of see their point of view on that.
Absolutely. We could look at pictures, and one thing you talked about water, you could have just as easily talking about forage production in a aspen stand going from 2,000 pounds per acre of forage production down to 20 pounds an acre, with the increase of conifers shading out the aspen and the appropriate grasses and forbs on the forest floor. Wow, that makes a huge impact in grazing. So what do we do about that? So the question for a forest plan question is, so what am I going to do about that? Can I really convert all those acres of conifer to grasslands? I don't know if I can physically. I don't know if there's social license to do it. What I'd want to have a conversation about, though, is, that has an impact on grazing. What can we manage with, or is there something about grazing that we can manage to help there, right? And I don't know what that is. I don't come with a solution. I come with, I think we have some problems. What do you think? What's the solution space look like? That's the kind of conversation we're trying to have.
So you're saying basically if a group of grazers or county commissioners came in and their prescription was, well, we think it would be better if we historically, because we saw the presentation from USU, there historically was a lot more aspen, there was a lot more forage, there was a lot more capability for grazing. This used to be a meadow. We think that we should be managing more of the land towards that end.
Right.
That's something that's the kind of input that Forest Service is looking for?
Yeah, that's one of the things. And how much of that can we do? So of the entire national forest is seeing the same change over time. You know, we are not going to treat every acre with fire or some mechanical treatment or some kind of reseeding. It's too big. We're not going to get every acre. So what do we do? Are there some specific spots we could do some of those changes in vegetation and produce more forage and take pressure off of an area that's being used heavier than we'd like? That's a possible solution for sure. And as I do that, how should we be talking to the permittees in terms of management of their livestock? What should we be measuring to measure our success? And what's the right mix? Again, you could look at historical, the presentations that were made this morning were really insightful. We could go back and say we're going to manage to 1860 conditions. I'm not sure drawing a line in the sand and picking a year like that is the right way to manage. It's not 1860 anymore. There's a lot of other people in the country and have other different interests. So as a group, can we agree on what we want to manage to in the future? If we can agree what we want the real estate, the dirt, trees, and rocks in my mind, if we can agree on what we want to manage to, that'd be a good thing. And let's have this forest plan conversation. That's where we could take it.
And I'm sure that the guys on the ground that are like fifth, sixth generation and users, and they see their water sources dwindling and it's being blamed on drought, but they know the conifer growth is growing and these things have changed.
Right.
And they say, okay, well, what we can do is change how you graze, and to them, when they hear that, that translates to, you're going to ask me to pull my allotments down. I mean, they just had a whole deal in Battle Mountain about that, and again, that was BLM range, but it's the same kind of issues. And if the prescription's all that way, and none of it's up in the hills, and none of it's changing some of that forage, then they'll say, we are paying for somebody else's desires instead of a true compromise. And from a supervisory standpoint, what do you think when you hear that sort of a conversation?
So, yeah, that's a good point. It feels like we're giving it up and we're not getting anything back. So make me an offer on something else we could do. That's where I'd start. Let's talk about it. And are we in a position where we can guarantee? I think that'd be disingenuous for me to guarantee something. What I could say is, though, if we could agree what we want it to look like, what's the mix of vegetation types across the forest, that's a place we can all ride to that point. And then we can work towards getting there. And I would say, like any individual, we know we have the goal, the perfect goal in mind, and we're going to work towards that. We may never, ever get to the perfect answer, but we're going to keep chipping away at it and moving in that direction. And that's the frame of reference I think it's important to have. It's the long term, right?
One last question. Their line, they look at the nemesis on the other side as environmental groups that are preservationists in philosophy. Do they need to be genuinely concerned about that pressure?
It's public land for the whole nation, and everybody has an interest in it. And so that's uncomfortable because you just mentioned they could be fifth or sixth generation. I got it. They have rightfully a lot of interest in what happens here, and I understand that. And it's also public land for the rest of the nation as well. And there is a conflict I don't know how to resolve, except let's get together and talk about what's our future? What do we want to get to? What's the future goal for us? That's the place to be. I don't believe I'm in a position, well, I'm not in a position, I'm not sure it'd be even good to isolate folks from those other views, because they're out there. And since I work for the entire nation, I think I need to listen to some of that. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I need to hear those other voices.
Okay, well, I think that's a very good place for us to get a framework for the perspective. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. We'll be right back with more of the county seat on our grazing issue, and we'll join you in comment. This is a great time to contact your friends, let them know that we have the show on today. It is a very good dialogue. We'll talk to you in a few minutes.